Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech. And today we're going to be talking about frogs in Pioneer. Usually I kind of name it with like aggro or mid-range or anything like that, but I couldn't really find, because this deck it's really just, for the most part, a bunch of frogs, but it's not necessarily an aggro deck. It's kind of more of like a Delirium Graveyard Synergy deck, which it'll all make sense in just a moment here. But anyways, let me know in the comment section below at the end of the video. What do you think about the deck? Is there any cards that I definitely should have included that I did not? And if you have any suggestions for upcoming videos, just let me know in the comment section. So, the one thing I will say before we also hop into the video is I originally recorded this video I want to say at least a week prior to this recording right now. And, I had the deck all ready to go. I even recorded it. I had it like uploaded and everything. And then, spoiler alert, there was a new frog that came out in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And obviously, I'm sure a lot of you guys probably know what the card is. But after seeing that, I said, wow, I have to include that card in the frog deck because it's a frog. So, as much as it stunk, I deleted the video and I'm re-recording it right now just because I really wanted to include the new frog that was featured. So let's go and hop into it here. So these are some of our early plays to help filter our graveyard. We're playing 4 copies of Seed of Hope, 2 copies of Vessel of Nascency, and 4 Witherbloom Command. Seed of Hope and Vessel of Nascency are pretty self-explanatory for the most part. We wanted some 1-drops, obviously, because there's not really a lot of 1-drops in the deck for the most part. The one thing with Vessel of Nascency, though, is it originally was a leftover from when I was working on it's like Tatsugiri Toad Rider, where whenever you play an enchantment, you make a frog, but there wasn't really enough good enchantments to play in the deck for the most part, so I ended up cutting that style of deck, but I still like the Vessels, so I decided to still play 2 copies of those. Witherbloom Command is really, really good, though. It's kind of like an Abrupt Decay that can also, like, mill yourself and get a land and that kind of thing. It's a pretty good card overall. Definitely a huge fan of Witherbloom Command. So, let's go and hop into the meat of the deck here. Obviously, what everyone wants to see are the frogs, but we still have one non-frog to talk about, and that's Satyr Wayfinder. The card's really good, being able to put 4 cards into the graveyard. 3 cards, because one of them is usually a land, and we put the rest into the graveyard. So, I thought about playing Grisly Salvage in the deck, and it'll make sense in a second why I'm not playing Grisly Salvage, just because there's a lot more synergies to playing a creature as opposed to an instant, which, again, it all makes sense in just a moment. But let's go ahead and talk about the frogs. We're playing 4 Poison Dart Frogs. So, Poison Dart Frog obviously is not the most incredible card on rate, but it's still really good in our deck. It's a mana dork for 2 mana, tap for 1 mana of any color, which is really, really nice, and it also has reach, so if we need to, like, chump block, for instance, maybe a Vein Ripper or something like that in a pinch, we can definitely do that. And we can also tap 2 and give it Death Touch until end of turn to be able to trade with anything in the late game. So definitely a big fan of the Poison Dart Frog. We're also playing 3 copies of Urg, Spawn of Turg. I've always thought that name was really funny. But its power is equal to the number of lands in our graveyard. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, we can look at the top card of our library, and we can put it into our graveyard. So essentially we surveil, and then for a black and green, sacrifice a land, you gain 2 life. So Urg can definitely get pretty big. We're also playing, again, a whole bunch of self-mill. So Urg, most of the time, is going to be a pretty decent-sized creature for our deck, which is definitely very, very nice. So, next slide here, and this is pretty much all the rest of the frogs that we're playing. This is the meat of the deck. We're playing 3 Grolnok the Omnivore. Huge fan of this card. Whenever a frog you control attacks, mill 3 cards. Whenever a permanent card is put into your graveyard from your library, exile it with a Croak counter, and you may play lands and cast spells from among cards you own in exile with a Croak counter on them, which, again, that's why we're playing the Satyr Wayfinder, because it's whenever a permanent is put into the graveyard. So, wanted to go ahead and mention that. We're also playing 4 copies of Thalia in the Gitrog Monster. It was my favorite card in the deck before the next card we're going to talk about, but I still really do like this card. 4 for 4, first strike Death Touch. You may play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, so it's kind of like Thalia Heretic Cathar from Eldritch Moon. And then whenever it attacks, sacrifice a creature or land, then draw a card. So definitely a huge fan of the card in general. We're playing 4 copies of it just because it's really good in like the aggro matchup. It's a pretty solid mid-range card as well. I mean, First Strike and Death Touch is really, really nasty. So definitely a huge fan of the card. The last thing I want to mention with these two cards is technically we are a Golgari based deck, but Grolnok and Thalia, obviously we got the blue and the white on there. We're playing a couple lands, like the soul lands that'll kind of help us play these efficiently. But I guess we'll talk about it more in a moment, but that's the only like white card and the only blue card that's actually in the entire deck. Just wanted to mention that. And last, definitely not least, arguably the best card in the deck, we're playing 2 copies of the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. 6/5 for 5, trample and haste. It's a frog horror mount. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that's saddled at this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power, and it has saddle 1. So, again, with the Satyr Wayfinder, technically we can saddle the Gitrog monster with the Satyr Wayfinder, which is pretty sweet. Technically, we can saddle really any amount of creatures, though, to be fair. And then, obviously, its combat damage ability is very, very good. So, definitely a big fan of the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. This card is sweet. I've got the question mark on there just because normally, I have the prices list out in US dollars, but with, like it's this, as of the recording of this video, the set is, we're at the end of spoiler season. We don't know what the price on this card is going to be. It's been fluctuating a lot recently. So I just put the question mark. So if you're wondering, oh, why is the actual price not on there? That is why. So those are all the frogs we got to talk about, but we still have one more slide we got to talk about. Some removal spells. We're playing 4 Power Word Kill and 2 Assassin's Trophy as our main removal spells. So Power Word Kill, you can realistically play anyone you want. You could play Bitter Triumph, you could play Infernal Grasp, you could play really whatever Doomblade you want for the most part. I think Power Word Kill at least hits the most things, because angels, demons, devils, dragons are not like incredibly popular. Like obviously, devils, you got like the Mayhem Devils, and the angels, there's the angel deck and that kind of thing. But really whatever Doomblade works for your local meta game, I would just play that one. Assassin's Trophy though is a catch-all. It hits everything, which is really, really nice. And not a lot of people are playing basic lands too. So, you might be able to catch your opponent off guard. They have like their one basic land in play, you trophy them, and all of a sudden, boom, they can't even actually search, and it's just a straight up Vindicate, which is a very sweet rate. So that's our entire main board, except we still got to talk about our lands, and then we're going to go over some sideboarding as well as some upgrade options. So, all right, let's go and hop into here. It's a pretty standard Golgari mana base. We're playing 4 Blooming Marsh, 4 Llanowar Waste, and 2 Restless Cottage as our main dual lands in the deck. We'll kind of talk about it more in a moment, but we're not playing a budget deck, but we're not playing the fully upgraded deck, if that kind of makes sense, which, again, that's something that we'll discuss in a moment. Finishing out our lands, we're playing 4 Secluded Courtyard and 4 Unclaimed Territory. Kind of like what I talked about earlier with Grolnok and Thalia and the Gitrog monster. We really just need one of these. If we get 1 Secluded Courtyard or 1 Unclaimed Territory, we are good to go. We can cast every single frog in the deck, and we also have Poison Dart Frog, so we have a little bit of insurance if we don't have the Courtyard or the Unclaimed Territory. Obviously, we are always going to name frog with this, and there's nothing else we're ever going to name with it, so just wanted to mention that. And then rounding out our lands, we're playing 4 Forests and 2 Swamps. And as our spicy basic land of the day, I'm featuring some original Innistrad forests and swamps. The reason I chose these, well, a couple of reasons is, one, a lot of the frogs are based off of, being out of Innistrad. The other reason being specifically because if you look at the art, I could definitely see some frogs living, like on both of these arts, like the forest there, we got like the little marshy area, like, I don't know if that's like a stream or just like some puddles, but I could definitely see a frog hanging out there. And on the swamp, obviously, I mean, like, I could definitely see some frogs. I feel like that's definitely where the Gitrog monster is hanging out when it's not on Thunder Junction. So I just wanted to go ahead and mention that as well. So, all right, let's go and hop into the sideboard here, which is really, really simple. We're going to want some Graveyard Hate. Obviously, there's a number of different Graveyard Hate cards we could play in the format. If you're looking to play on a budget, definitely Tormod Script is the best option. We're going to want some Vampire's Hate as well. Personally, I recommend playing a card like Pick Your Poison or Pithing Needle, or even both. They're both really fantastic sideboard cards in the metagame as a whole. We're going to want some extra removal. For the most part, extra removal, it just depends on what your local metagame looks like. If there's like a lot of mono green going around, sure, play some Noxus Grasps. If you need like more cheaper, efficient removal, play some Bloodchief's Thirst. If you got an extra couple Fatal Pushes laying around, play some Fatal Pushes, that kind of thing. It's really up to you, just depends on your local metagame and what you need to play. If there's a lot of humans, maybe play some Rave Enfeeblement, that kind of thing, or even Abrupt Decay. If there's spirits, really whatever. It's, we're Golgari. We can play any removal spell that we want to play. And we're also going to want some hand attack spells. Duress is the best budget option, and it's still really good in general. People still play Duress. People have been playing it for years. The card is definitely very, very good. Or you could also play some Thoughtseize as well, or even Go Plank. It's very customizable, but if you'd like to know exactly what I'm playing in my sideboard, the deck list is going to be in the description below, so you can check out what I have in my sideboard currently. So, next thing we got to talk about, and the last thing, is the upgrade option. So, again, we're not exactly like a budget deck per se, but there's definitely some upgrades we could make to this deck, including Shocklands and Cavernous Souls. Obviously, Cavernous Souls just kind of replaces, like, Unclaimed Territory, the better of the, you know, the lands. Like, I mean, Cavernous Souls is strictly better than Unclaimed Territory, just because it gets the uncounterable clause. And then at that point, with the Shocklands, you know, not only could you play Overgrown Tomb, but, you know, you could play, like, a couple of Breeding Pools, or you could play a couple of Watery Graves, or, you know, Temple Gardens, to kind of help with casting your other non-Golgari frogs. Channel lands are really, really good in this deck just because they have a lot of synergy, especially with, like, not even just, like, Gitrog, but, you know, whenever a permanent's put into the graveyard, we exile the Croak counter. So, like, Takenuma is really, really good, and Boseiju is also very, very strong. Again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, too, with Thoughtseize, if you have them laying around, put them in the deck. If you don't have them, don't worry about it. It's not 100% necessary for the deck to function. But the one thing I want to mention is the current list is only $86 to build. That's not including the new Gitrog, which, again, we don't know where that card's going to sit just because it's probably going to be a really popular commander card, and the card is just strong in general. It's a frog, that kind of thing. So, but you could also just substitute the new Gitrog with the old Gitrog monster. I know that card's, I think, around $5 US a piece. You can just make an easy substitute for that and still have a really, really good frog 5-drop. But again, the list is only $86 as it is right now, and most of the cost is just in, like, the Blooming Marshes and, like, a couple other random cards. So the deck is definitely very, very cheap if you're looking to play something, you know, fun and new at your FNM, or if you just really, really like frogs and you just want to play frogs. So why not? This deck is definitely very, very cool. One of the more unique decks I've ever built here on the channel, I would say. You know, frogs is not a very common creature type, and this was a really, really fun deck to build. So that takes us to the end of the video. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about the deck? What's your favorite frog that was featured in the deck? Is there a card that I forgot to put in the deck that definitely should have been? Just let me know in the comment section. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.